Thank you so much, and good afternoon and welcome. And on behalf of the K through 12 Resource Directory, we want to welcome you to the Back to School Open House, Cultivating Resilience During COVID-19 and Beyond. Next slide. We want to welcome those that joined us last week and those that are joining us today. Thank you so much for taking the time again to learn about school mental health resources. And we just want to remind you that for the month of September, the Orange County Resource Directory is hosting a weekly 30-minute session, which we're going to focus on a specific topic and highlight a resource that was developed by the Resource Directory team. Next slide. And I'm Angela Castellanos, the School and Community Liaison for the Center for Applied Research Solutions. I'm also here joined by my team, Ingrid and Stephen, who are here to support you in technology-related questions or issues that come up. We are here to connect with you. So excited to have them here as well. And for those that don't know me, I serve as a mental health clinician, or I have served as a mental health clinician and school administrator for the past 25 years in implementing, developing, sustaining school mental health resources throughout the LA County, Orange County, and then also national projects that I've been working on through the Center for Applied Research Solutions. Next slide. And who we are. And so I just want to give a little reminder about what this project is about. So the Orange County Healthcare Agency has partnered with the Center for Applied Research Solutions to provide school staff, teachers, coaches, and parents the tools and resources to support and promote school mental health and wellness to the K through 12 school community. And so we are one of the 4 projects that is funded through this initiative. Next slide. And today, this is our agenda. This is going to be our roadmap. So we already talked about who we are, and we'll talk a little bit about who you are and what brings you together here to join us in this particular session. We're also going to highlight and showcase some resources today in regards to cultivating resilience during this time. And lastly, we're going to go through a little discussion about information, and we want to hear from you and as far as feedback and anything else that we can do to provide additional resources to you as well. Next slide. So before we get started, a couple of different just reminders, even though that this is a very fast 30-minute showcase, almost like speed resource allocation here. It's going to be 30 minutes. We are recording this session, but we also want this to be a very interactive experience for you. We want you to get the most out of it, ask any questions. Because of the time allotment, we might not get to all of the questions, but we are definitely going to try to answer every specific question and comment that's placed in the chat. The other piece that we're going to also ask you to do, we're going to invite you to also, if you're at your desk if you have a desktop or a laptop, please open up 2 browsers. One is that we are going to be completing a polling activity at the end of this particular session. So we're going to ask you, Ingrid's actually going to put this link in the chat, and we're going to ask you to open up this browser and copy the information, the code, and then also press enter, but don't answer any of the questions just yet. We just wanted to make sure that we give you preparation time so that we're ready to go once we're ready to initiate the poll. The third browser we're going to ask you to open is we're going to do a little scavenger hunt today in regards to looking up some resources. So we want to make sure that we wanted to give you some instructions before we get started. Okay, thank you so much. Next slide. All right, now that you know who we are, we want to know who you are. Okay, you see a couple of familiar names on the screen here, but I want you to write in your name and then your role within school mental health, possibly your agency or district that you work for. But the other question that I want you to think about is, today's session is about cultivating resilience. So what comes to mind when you hear the word resilience? I want you to put that in the chat. And for me, the first thing that I think about resilience is strength. That's the word that comes to mind for me. What comes to mind for you? I'm going to put in the chat here, strength. What comes to mind when you hear the word resilience? Hi, Erin. Welcome. Your risk manager for schools. Thank you so much for joining us today. Being able to bounce back, right? That's the other piece that we think about strength again. We think about enduring hardships, right? What we think about in relation to resilience. Anybody else wants to chime in? What are some trauma and healing? These are great words that we think about when we think about the word resilience, perseverance, right? Moving forward. Okay, thank you so much for participating.
And then we also had Van Boy join as UC Human Relations, as a human relations specialist. And I see enduring hardships is what I think of when I hear resilience. Just wanted to chime in with that
Nice.
for the repetition.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Samantha also put in here the ability to have hope, right? So we have all of these wonderful terms and words that really resonate for us when we think about resilience. So thank you for sharing. The next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what cultivating resilience means. And I'm going to be reading a little story, a very short story. But as I read the story, I want you to think about how are you, your district, your team, maybe your family, how are you cultivating resilience? So I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to have you guys kind of think about that. But as I'm reading this particular story, I want you to think about those pieces. Okay. So one of the things that I was doing a little bit of research about resilience, the metaphor of the kintsugi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this is the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi, which offers a rich metaphor around the area of resilience. Kintsugi means to join with gold. It is a crafting method that consists of assembling broken pieces of an accidentally smashed pot. With roots in the Zen philosophy of wabi-sabi, kintsugi celebrates imperfection. The broken pieces of the pot are glued together with lacquer inflicted with a very luxuriant gold powder. The visible fractures are adorned with gold rather than hidden. Symbolically, the golden cracks represent the worth of the bowl because of its imperfections rather than in spite of them. The bowl is like a human, cracked by the contingency of life. The gold endows the pot with unassailable beauty, uniqueness, and strength. Kintsugi and wabi-sabi can teach the Western culture about the process of becoming oneself. There's a lesson for embracing failures and experiences that crack our spirit. And how do we turn those life cracks into gold? This relates back to the idea of building resilience or cultivating resilience in schools, especially for our younger students or all of our students, right? We've all been experiencing this collective trauma. So how do we turn all of these different cracks into gold, right? And the good news is that resilience skills can be learned, right? So like I said, we've gone through this collective trauma. Kids have now come back to school. Some of us have been in school in session for about 3 weeks. Some of us, maybe this is our first week back. So it just kind of depends wherever that the process is. But, all of our students, our families, our teams are experiencing all of these pieces. So that's the good news is that we can rebuild. And somebody put in the chat, bounce back, right? From all of these experiences that we're going through. And building resilience is really building the opportunity to adapt well to adversity, to trauma, to tragedy. It doesn't mean that we're not going to experience any difficulty. It's really about creating that aspect of how do we address this particular traumatic experience or stress that we're experiencing. How do we address it? How do we deal with that, right? And so this particular story was so nice for me. It really resonated because wanted to just kind of think about how do we use this metaphor to help our students bounce back, cultivate that resilience within our own practice as well. And how do we build these skills or enhance these skills that our kiddos already have, right? So even our team members may also possess some of these different qualities and different abilities to be able to bounce back. So that's the good news, right? And so thinking back about the question that I asked initially is, as I was reading this story, what resonated for you, right? How does your district, how do your agency cultivate resilience during this time, right? So feel free to put that information in the chat if something came up for you, resonated for you. And as we're thinking about cultivating resilience with our students, there's a combination of different pieces that we can actually support our students through. And one is creating social competence. The other is to supporting a sense of optimism. There's so much negativity around our communities, but it's really about helping them to support them to think about or maintain the optimism, finding a sense of purpose, right? Connections to, we know that the research really supports connection to the school community, really enhances that resilience factor as well, enhancing problem solving skills, affecting coping styles as well, and also enhancing their positive self image. So these are some 7 pieces that we as educators can continue to embrace and support our students. And in the next slide, these are some pieces that the resource directory is supporting this whole concept of cultivating resilience. And so today we're going to enhance the already great work that you do, right? With your tiered systems of support, your resources, all of the different interventions that you're already providing. These particular resources are going to either enhance or add to whatever resources that you are providing to cultivating this resilience in your school sites. So we have 4 that we're highlighting today, and one is the Orange County LGBTQ Resource Guide. We also have coping cards that we have developed as well, and youth suicide and mental health concerns during COVID-19. And we also have a really nice list of crisis lines or hotlines that are vetted and utilized within the county as well. The next slide. So for the next 3-4 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a scavenger hunt, a virtual scavenger hunt. So the first piece that we want you to do is we want you to open up a browser if you're on your desktop or computer or laptop. And Ingrid's actually going to place this particular link into the chat, and we're going to take you straight to the resource directory. Okay. We're going to actually also place the 4 products that we developed into the chat. And what we want you to do is just select one. Select one of the resources, because we're not going to have time to go through all of them. We want you to we're inviting you to just browse through it, take a look at all of those different resources, and think about one thing, or you can think about 3, but one, what are you excited about? What really excites you about this particular product? The second is you might have additional questions about this particular product. And the third is we may be missing something. Is there an additional resource that we didn't highlight on any of the resources that you can give us feedback on? We're going to pause there, and then we're going to come back and share out. And for those that actually are listening on their phones, we're going to take an opportunity to actually do this here virtually so you can actually see it. And just kind of take a look at that for the next 3 to 4 minutes. We're going to just browse and do a scavenger hunt, play around with the resource directory so you can take a look at some of the additional resources. But today we're just focusing on those 4. So I'm hoping that those instructions were clear. Again, so Stephen, I'm going to actually share my screen, and I'm going to take everybody through this scavenger hunt here. There we go. Where am I sharing? This is Sure, here. Can you guys see my screen now? Thumbs up.
Yep, it looks good.
Perfect. All right. So this is a resource directory. I know there's a very short video that you can also take a look at, but this particular resource is just specifically for Orange County school community. If you go over, hover over the search resources, you go to the resource directory, and then this is a keyword search. So what we're going to do is just put in the coping cards. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, click on view more, and you access the coping cards here. So you can do that with any of the four products, but we're going to take a look at the positive coping cards here just for the next maybe 3 to 4 minutes. I think at this point, we'll just probably maybe do a couple minutes just so that you have the opportunity to take a look at the other resources if you do have time. But take a look at these resources. Again, keep it in mind. What are you curious about? Do you have any questions about this? Did we miss anything? Okay, as I'm browsing this here, hopefully you can see. This may be a little too big. Does this look okay? These coping cards are all by topic, right? And if you click here, there's different grounding techniques that you can actually link to as well. Am I going too fast on this? It's different pieces. There's teachers have used them in a variety of different ways, but we'll have a conversation about that in the next minute or so. So you can do the same thing. I actually have the other resources or products up already. So I have the crisis hotlines here. So we have any kind of local support, state resources, national resources. Okay, so that's one. The other one that I have up already is the tip sheets for families with suicide and mental health concerns during COVID-19. These are some tips that parents can utilize. And just so that you know, some of these products are also being translated as well. So they're going to be offered in different languages. We're going through that process right now. And then the last one here is, sorry, I'm getting everybody dizzy here. It's the resources for teachers, parents, families, friends, and allies of LGBTQ youth. So there's a ton of different resources. If you actually click or hover over any of the blue lines or highlighted lines, you can actually go directly to that particular link in the site. So that's those pieces there. It's very easy, a very easy website to just maneuver. You can research any other or search any other pieces if you go directly to the keyword search, or you can also search it by topic or audience as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. And let's kind of come back and talk a little bit about, I know it was a very quick overview of the resources, but is there anybody has any like questions or, you know, one aspect that you're curious about, questions about the particular resources, or what do you see, what do you want to see more of? Is this exciting? Can all of these resources be utilized at your school sites? Yes, for sure. Any questions about any of the products? Thank you, Marlene. Yeah, they're very easy and accessible. So you can actually go onto the website now and download them. You can put them on your website at your agency. You can print them out if you'd like, but they're all ready to go for you. So let's see. there's excellent information. So one question is, Erin, I think that's a really good resource that we can think about. We do have some resources through a different project, but what we can do is maybe think about addressing some of these concerns or some of those specific pieces about what types of behaviors that you're seeing out in the community. So that's something that we can think about. So that's really great feedback because we don't have anything specific just yet. Any other questions or curiosities, things that have come up for you in viewing these particular resources? Okay. What about how might you use these resources to support cultivating resilience? Does anybody have any ideas or any ways that you can utilize some of these resources for your school sites? You may be thinking about, what, I need to actually see them and then come up with ideas, right? So thinking about reviewing much more the information and maybe thinking about or integrating into discussion with students. The coping cards are really excellent to provide some of the skill sets, skills for the students whenever they're acting out. These are some cards that they can actually use or different tools where teachers can actually provide this to the classroom. The other piece too is like any students, any like additional resources, connect them to those particular crisis hotlines. So those can actually be connected to any of your websites as well. Yes, sharing the information with school counselors and principals. Excellent, Samantha. That's another great idea of using the coping cards as grounding techniques and restorative circles when mentoring teachers. That's fantastic. Idea that you can actually utilize some of these pieces of cultivating resilience. So as you are thinking about, once you leave this session today, please feel free to browse through any additional resources on the resource directory, but thinking about much other ideas in regards to how to integrate some of these resources onto your MTSS, your PBIS systems of support. Those are great opportunities to be able to think about some of those. And they're free and they're already accessible. So that's the nice thing. And then, like I said earlier, we are working on translating them in different languages. So that's the nice thing that you can also connect with. The coping cards are definitely a great resource to use around campus and in the classroom, definitely. These are handouts that can be provided to the teachers and then just kind of place them, or if there is a calming corner that maybe that there's a calming corner in the classroom, maybe the coping cards can be placed there, laminated, and then kids can actually use them or reuse them, right? So those are great ideas. So thank you so much for sharing that information. All right. So the next part of this, so thank you so much for participating in that virtual, super fast, like speed scavenger hunt that we did in the last 5 minutes. And then the next slide, we're inviting you to work on a poll that we're going to actually put on the screen in a second. And this particular poll will give us additional feedback on what are some additional ways that or other products, maybe resources, or if you would be interested in a series of implementation or an implementation series to have discussions about much more in depth about how to integrate some of these resources onto your already systems that you have of support. So Ingrid and Stephen are actually going to be placing this poll in the chat and also on the screen. So the first question is, would you participate in the learning series on implementation? So if you can vote, that'd be fantastic. Thanks, Ingrid. So if you open up the browser, copy and paste this particular link onto that browser and then put in the code, and you will be able to vote. So we'll give you about another 30 seconds or so we can move on to the next question. Do we move on to the next question? Or can we move on to the next question? I always get confused with the polling. We're getting that set up for you. Okay. The next question is, what will you hunt down? Are you curious about researching the information on the resource directory? Are you going to look more into this, the resources that we talked about today, highlighted? Mental health, resources, training, mental support. Excellent. I think it would be fantastic if you can share all of the resources to colleagues, your teams, right? Crisis contact information. Just have a blast. Just go into the resource directory, research tons of resources there available. All right, let's move on to the next question. What are you going to pass on? This is the same, request that we had, or the invitation for you to pass on this information. What will you pass on? Coping cards, online resources. I love how these show up on here. Okay. Everything. Nice. Thank you for sharing everything on here. The OC link contacts, right? All the different resources. County and local chapters, those are great information to have. Fantastic. All right, let's move on to the next question. What are the barriers to accessing resources related to school mental health? What are some of the barriers? Shame and fear. Stigma, financial circumstances, transportation, language access, stigma. Thank you for sharing. Too many places to look and not sure where to go and find the right resources, right? There's so many resources. Parent guardian buy-in, finances, transportation. Staff overwhelmed and not having all the appropriate staff to deal with mental health. And then also sometimes there's new staff, right? A lot of school districts right now are hiring additional school counselors, school social workers. So there's a lot of new staff that need to be trained. So they have to also be aware of all the resources also. Mental health not seen as a priority. Language, family resistance, changing staff. Yeah, so it's that buy-in, right? It's just important to have that top level buy-in to be able to provide some of these additional supports and resources. Thank you. We're going to go on to the last question. what are the challenges to searching and finding student mental health resources? So this is a little similar. You might have some similar answers to the previous question, right? So you might see some it could be barriers like transportation might be one. And also somebody put on there earlier, finding resources, but not sure where to go or where to start. It's a primary one, right? Parents' influences. Yes, very much so. Community influences as well. Money, transportation, parents. Yeah, there are a lot of agencies that have parts of mental health, but not consolidated in one location. That's an excellent point. The other piece too is that some agencies focus specifically on, or they only provide services for certain insurances or Medi-Cal, and then there's even within the managed care system, they're also overloaded as well. So maybe another challenge might be long wait lists, right? So that might be another aspect as well. Okay, thank you. And I believe this is the last question, right? Agency not accepting new patients. That's a really, really good one. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. There is one more. I think that's it. It's the last one. Thank you so much for participating in that poll. It gives us a really good opportunity and idea and information about what are some additional products that we can think about, or possibly additional learning sessions that we can connect with. So it gives us a really good opportunity to share that piece. Okay, so we're now at 3:33, and we had a lot of information to give you. So we're just going to quickly go over the last piece about upcoming events. So just to keep in mind that the month of September, we're continuing to host mini learning sessions about the products, and we're showcasing. So we're hoping that we're going to see you again September 16th, 23rd. You can go on to the next slide, Stephen. These are going to be, we're going to have actually guest presenters to talk about the products that they develop. The next week, we're going to talk about trauma and self-care in the classroom, but this is specifically to cultivate self-care for the teacher and how that really connects to the way that you're building that classroom environment. September 23rd is a active approaches to suicide prevention, and it's really integrating successful suicide prevention campaigns. And this is a great way to really get that buy-in from all of the stakeholders to create prevention services for students. And the last one is the orange folder. That's the highlight that we're going to be focusing on. And this is another great way to coordinate all of the resources onto one sheet so that individuals at your school sites can actually know who to call and what to see, when they notice as symptoms of distress, see something, say something. Okay, so that's going to be the other part here too. So we're hoping that you're going to join us the next few sessions. And again, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening. So that concludes our session today. And on behalf of the Orange County Resource Director, we'd like to give you a hearty thank you for all the work that you do. And we applaud you and we thank you, and we hope to see you next week.